Holy moly, it's hot outside. And with it being hot outside, maybe now is not the best time to watch movies. But if you're sitting comfortable, if you have a cool drink and the fan's on beside you, you might want to check out some of these movies that are inspired by the oppressive heat and live in the world of boutique Blu-ray. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris and I'm here to give you some Blu-ray recommendations or films that you may want to watch that live in the world of this god-awful heat. It's not a definitive list by any means, but it's meant to encourage you to watch some movies that you may not have seen. So while there are lots of famous movies, Hollywood movies that you may have seen that centre around the heat, like Falling Down, Heat, or even something a bit further back like 12 Angry Men, here are some recommendations which you may not have seen from boutique Blu-ray labels in the hope that you might want to watch better movies. Not better, of course, but different movies and expand your horizons if that's what you're into. And the first one I'm going to start with is a sort of very famous movie with some very famous performances. In fact, some of the most famous performances of all time. And we're going to talk about Streetcar Named Desire. Now, this one is the HMV Premium Collection version. But Streetcar Named Desire is a film that's set in the very oppressive heat world of New Orleans. We have a young, kind of aristocratic seeming lady called Blanche that comes to stay and live with her sister and her husband in the bayou. It is an tempestuous film. It's Marlon Brando as the brother-in-law. It has Vivian Leigh as Blanche herself. And these two central performances are two of the greatest pairing of people, I think, in cinema history. The Streetcar Named Desire maybe hasn't got the releases that maybe it deserves and why I consider it possibly underseen, but it is an absolute whirlwind of emotion and of, you know, there's a nasty side to Streetcar, you know, exemplified by Brando himself, just being a nasty piece of work. And the end of it, kind of as the heat rises, Blanche devolves, all comes to a magnificent conclusion at the end and is well worth checking out. Next one is from Criterion, and this one is, well, a bit of an underappreciated gem from a female director. I think is utterly fantastic. It is Lucrecia Martel's La Ciénaga. Now, La Ciénaga stands for the swamp, and this is a film set in Southern America, where you have a story told you of a family relationship, or of a family, how they get on together. You have parents who are kind of absent. They're shown at the start to be very like loudy and drunk. Not good examples for the kids or for the young people that are within their care. There are family members that have moved away, and an incident causes them all to come back together. People that have been trying to escape this family, this toxic family, but they're still tied together by family. And it's very much about how people will survive and relate and get on in kind of challenging circumstances. And I think it's a film that bears watching and rewatching, as again the oppressive heat of the swamp kind of aligns quite nicely with the idea that the swamp rots and that it festers and that it kind of erodes away. With a really terrific watch, and while it may not be the most entertaining film, I think it pertains very nicely to the feeling of heat and the world that we live in. Next up, if you're a fan of the channel, and you'll see that I've talked about this before, and this is 90 Degrees in the Shade from Indicator. Now, 90 Degrees in the Shade is a film, there's heat in it, but it's a Czech-British co-production, and it tells the story of a woman who works for a man who is married, but she's also having an affair with him, and she'll make excuses for him. But as it comes along, there's an auditor comes into play, and he wants to do inventory and stock check of the business and what's happening there. And she's the administrator, the worker in the building, and she's caught in between the auditor and the married man, and the lengths to maybe she may or may not want to compromise herself. There's a really interesting like soundtrack to this. It's like a jazz feel to it that kind of elevates it a little bit, and we'll talk about another film that's elevated by its soundtrack as well in a while. But I think 90 Degrees in the Shade, it sits very broadly in the world of interesting Indicator release, and one that is definitely worth checking out, because as the heat rises, the stakes rise, and you find out what people are made of or who they are under pressure. Next one's a bit of an oddball, or certainly not in the same genre as the ones that we've talked about before, and it is Arrow Video's release of Night of the Comet. Now, Night of the Comet is a kind of very much 80s, lower budget, kind of schlocky film in which somebody wakes up the next day and a comet has wiped out most of humanity. And while the heat's risen in LA, I think it's set in, might not be LA, and everybody else seems to be like zombified. And so you have like a zombie movie in the oppressive heat, and then this idea of can you survive? It's a survival movie. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's great fun, something to really get your teeth into. And if you're looking at distraction, certainly in the heat, I think you could do an awful lot worse than Night of the Comet. Next one is another film that I've talked about recently, and actually these last two that I'm going to talk about are both from the same country. They're both from Australia. This is Sunday Too Far Away, from Umbrella Entertainment's Sunbird Screens line. Sunbird Screens line being their tribute to lesser seen Australian cinema. I dearly love this line, and this is probably the best title that I've seen from that whole collection. It tells a story rather undramatically or otherwise of a group of men who are going to shear sheep, and how they set up and how they're going to make their money. They work in inhospitable conditions, in real sweat houses, trying to make a fortune, except all they do with that fortune is drink, spend time in each other's company. There is a competitive nature to it. There is an undercurrent in the background of, a scab strike and of pay conditions and all of that. It turns out that it was only half the movie that wanted to be made, but I think it's utterly fascinating. I think the group of characters they had together here, led by Jack Thompson, is utterly fascinating as you see this kind of found family idea of people coming together and how the competitive nature, as the top dog here, Jack Thompson, is challenged and people want to have his crown. I think Sunday Too Far Away is a brilliant film and depiction of a life that I really don't know an awful lot about within the oppressive heat. And the last film I'm going to talk about is, a recent BFI release of The Proposition. It's a 4K release that I have here. It's a rather beautiful release that we have. The Proposition is a story set in 1880s Australia. It's a western in which a notorious family is kind of thinned out in a shootout, and one of the main people is captured. Part of that family, the Burns family, is captured, Guy Pearce, and he is given a proposition by Ray Winston's character, who basically says, all will be well as long as you kill your brother, who's seen as a bit of a rogue and a bit of a problem. There's the setup of the proposition, but what you have is very much a beautifully told story, beautifully told in pretty much every cinematic piece of language that you can put together. It is incredibly shot. They use the most of the Australian setting that they have. It has got great performances in it. Ray Winston, John Hurt, Guy Pearce. It's just a never-ending stream of wonderful performances in it. And it's all written and scored by Nick Cave and subsequently Warren Ellis. It elevates it even further. So from wonderful cinematography to incredible soundtrack, incredible performances, it's a really deep and thought-provoking film. Incredibly underseen, especially when you consider it has an absolutely stellar boutique Blu-ray release. So if you haven't seen The Proposition, I think you should check it out. There are many other ones, including many from Australia and the like. What are your recommendations for films that are about the heat, that maybe people have not seen, that maybe sit a little outside the comfort level of others? Let me know in the comments and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care, all the best.